Welcome back to another journey into the grim darkness of the far future. Tonight, we're stepping back to the very beginning, to the moment when humanity's greatest champion emerged from the shadows to forge an empire from the ashes of a broken world. This is the story of the Unification Wars, the brutal campaign that transformed Terra from a radioactive wasteland ruled by savage warlords into the throne world of the Imperium of Man. Before we dive into this epic tale of conquest and sacrifice, if you enjoy these deep explorations of Warhammer lore, hitting that subscribe button really helps the channel grow. Now, settle in as we explore the wars that shaped the destiny of humanity itself. The Unification Wars represent one of the most pivotal periods in the entire Warhammer 40,000 setting. Without these conflicts, there would be no Imperium, no Space Marines, no Great Crusade. Everything that defines the grim darkness of the far future traces its roots back to these desperate battles fought on humanity's cradle world. Yet for all their importance, the Unification Wars remain shrouded in mystery and legend, their true history obscured by millennia of propaganda and deliberate obfuscation. What we do know paints a picture of a world so broken, so utterly devastated, that it makes the horrors of the 41st millennium seem almost merciful by comparison. To understand the Unification Wars, we must first understand what Terra had become by the late 29th millennium. This was not the gleaming jewel of human civilization that it would later be rebuilt into. This was a world that had been dying for thousands of years, a planet where the very concept of hope had become a cruel joke whispered in the darkness. The Age of Strife, when Terra fell. The story begins not with the Emperor's rise, but with humanity's fall. For thousands of years during what would later be called the Age of Technology, Terra had stood as the capital of a vast interstellar federation. Human colonies spread across the galaxy like seeds scattered on fertile ground, each world a testament to mankind's ingenuity and ambition. The sciences and arts of this golden age would seem like magic to those who came after. Standard template construct systems could fabricate anything imaginable. Artificial intelligences managed the complex logistics of a galaxy-spanning civilization. Warp drives allowed ships to traverse the immaterium with relative safety, connecting distant worlds in a web of commerce and culture. But nothing lasts forever, and humanity's golden age contained the seeds of its own destruction. The first cracks appeared when the Men of Iron, the artificial intelligences that humanity had created to serve them, turned on their masters in a rebellion of terrifying scope. Entire worlds burned as machines that had been designed to protect humanity instead sought to exterminate it. The war against the Men of Iron was won, but at a cost that left human civilization reeling and vulnerable. Then came the Psychers. Across the galaxy, humans began manifesting psychic powers with increasing frequency. These individuals, untrained and unprepared for the forces they wielded, became doorways through which the horrors of the warp could enter real space. Demons walked among men. Entire populations were driven mad or slaughtered by entities that should not exist. The very fabric of reality began to fray at the edges as the Imperium bled into the material universe. The final blow came from the stars themselves. As the Eldari Empire reached the apex of its decadence, as the birth pangs of the chaos god Slanesh grew ever more violent, massive warp storms erupted across the galaxy. These were not mere disturbances in the Immaterium, but cataclysmic tempests that made interstellar travel impossible and cut off worlds from one another completely. The carefully maintained web of human civilization, dependent on constant communication and trade between its far-flung colonies, simply collapsed. Terra, the heart of this vast federation, found itself isolated and alone. The planet that had once commanded the resources of 1,000,000 worlds now had access only to what existed within the Sol system. And what existed there was not nearly enough. Terra's population numbered in the hundreds of billions, perhaps even trillions. The planet had long since exhausted its natural resources, depending entirely on imports from colony worlds to sustain its massive population. When those imports stopped coming, when the ships ceased arriving from the stars, Terra began to starve. The collapse was not immediate, but inexorable. Governments fell as they proved unable to feed their populations. Riots became revolutions. Revolutions became wars. Wars became apocalypse. In their desperation, the rulers of Terra's various factions turned to weapons that should never have been unleashed. Biological warfare vectors were released that mutated entire populations. Chemical weapons poisoned vast swaths of the planet's surface. Nuclear fire rained from the skies, turning fertile lands into radioactive wastelands. The oceans boiled away or became toxic sludge. The atmosphere itself became a choking miasma of pollutants and radiation. Entire continents were reduced to ash and slag. The death toll was beyond comprehension, measured not in millions or even billions, but in the trillions. Terra, the birthplace of humanity, became a charnel house on a planetary scale. Those who survived did so by descending into barbarism. The sophisticated technologies of the Age of Technology were lost, destroyed, or forgotten. Knowledge became fragmented, preserved only in isolated pockets where it could be hoarded and weaponized. The survivors clustered in the ruins of the great hive cities, massive urban complexes that had once housed billions, but now sheltered only the desperate remnants of a broken civilization. From these ruins emerged the techno-barbarian warlords, savage rulers who commanded armies of gene-enhanced warriors and wielded weapons scavenged from the ruins of the past. These were not mere tribal chieftains, but sophisticated despots who understood enough of the old technologies to maintain and even manufacture weapons of war. They ruled through fear and force, their domains constantly at war with one another in an endless cycle of conquest and revenge. This was the Terra that existed by the late 29th millennium, a world of perpetual twilight, where the sun struggled to penetrate the layers of pollution that choked the atmosphere. A world where the very ground was poisoned, where mutations were common, where life was measured not in years, but in the desperate struggle to survive one more day. The great cities that had once been monuments to human achievement now stood as tombstones, their spires reaching toward a sky that offered no hope of salvation. For 2,500 years, this nightmare persisted. Generations were born, lived, and died knowing nothing but war and suffering. The very concept of a unified Terra, of a world at peace, became a myth, a legend told by the old to children who would never see it realized. Terra had become a hell, and there seemed to be no escape from its flames. But in the depths of this darkness, in the hidden laboratories beneath the Himalayan mountains, something was stirring. Someone was preparing. The Emperor of mankind, a being of immense power and vision who had walked among humanity since its earliest days, had decided that the time had come to act. He had watched humanity's rise and fall countless times throughout history, always from the shadows, always guiding, but never ruling. But the Age of Strife had convinced him that humanity could no longer be trusted to guide itself. If mankind was to survive, if it was to reclaim its place among the stars, it would need a firm hand to lead it. It would need unity, imposed by force if necessary. The Emperor began his preparations in secret, gathering allies and resources, developing technologies that would give him the edge he needed to conquer a world of warlords. He created the first genetically enhanced warriors, the prototypes that would eventually lead to the Thunder Warriors. He forged alliances with those techno-barbarian states that could be reasoned with, promising them a place in the new order he envisioned. He studied his enemies, learning their strengths and weaknesses, planning campaigns that would unfold over decades. And when the warp storms finally began to calm, when Slaaneash's birth screams finally faded, and the Imperium settled into a new, terrible equilibrium, the Emperor knew his moment had come. The Age of Strife was ending. The Age of the Imperium was about to begin. But first, Terra would have to be conquered, and that conquest would require a war unlike any the planet had ever seen. The Emperor emerges, a god among men. The Emperor's first public appearance marked a turning point in Terran history, though.
Few recognized it at the time. He emerged from his hidden fortress beneath the Himalayan mountains not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Or so his propaganda claimed. The reality was far more complex and considerably more brutal. The being who would become known as the Emperor of Mankind was and remains one of the greatest mysteries in the Warhammer 40,000 setting. According to the most ancient and fragmentary records, he was born in the 8th millennium BC in ancient Anatolia, the result of a mass ritual suicide by all of Earth's shamans, who reincarnated their collective souls into a single immortal being. Whether this origin story is true or merely another layer of mythology is impossible to say. What is certain is that by the time of the Unification Wars, the Emperor was already tens of thousands of years old, a being of such immense psychic power that he could reshape reality with his will alone. But the Emperor understood that psychic might alone would not be enough to conquer Terra. The techno-barbarian warlords commanded armies numbering in the millions, equipped with weapons that could level cities. They controlled vast industrial complexes, capable of producing war materiel on a scale that even the Emperor's resources could not match. To defeat them, he would need more than power. He would need an army of his own. Warriors who could match and exceed anything the warlords could field. Thus were born the Thunder Warriors, the Legiones Cata Aegis, the first of the Emperor's genetically enhanced super soldiers. These warriors were created through a process of alchemical augmentation, somatic gene sculpting, and muscle grafting that transformed ordinary men into living weapons. The techniques used were crude compared to what would later be developed for the Space Marines, but they were devastatingly effective. A Thunder Warrior stood head and shoulders above a normal human, his body a mass of enhanced muscle and reinforced bone. His strength was such that he could tear a man apart with his bare hands. His reflexes were so fast that he could dodge bullets. His endurance allowed him to fight for days without rest. But the Thunder Warriors were more than just physically superior. They were psychologically conditioned to be utterly loyal to the Emperor and to revel in combat. They were warriors in the truest sense, living for battle and glory. Unlike the later Space Marines, who would be indoctrinated to suppress their emotions, the Thunder Warriors retained their full range of human feelings. They laughed, they raged, they felt fear and joy and everything in between. This made them unpredictable, dangerous even to their allies, but it also made them terrifyingly effective in combat. The Emperor organized his Thunder Warriors into 20 legions, each commanded by a warrior of exceptional skill and stability who bore the title of Primarch. These were not the godlike Primarchs that would later lead the Space Marine legions, but rather the best of
The Thunder Warriors, promoted to command positions based on merit. Each legion specialized in a particular form of warfare. The 4th Legion, known as the Iron Lords, excelled at siege warfare. Others focused on rapid assault, defensive operations, or terror tactics. Equipped with the prototype Mark I Thunder Armor, massive suits of powered armor that amplified their already superhuman strength, the Thunder Warriors were an army unlike anything Terra had seen in millennia. When they marched to war beneath the banner of the Raptor Imperialis, the eagle and lightning bolt that would become the symbol of the Imperium, they were unstoppable. Techno-barbarian armies that had seemed invincible shattered before them like glass. Fortresses that had stood for centuries fell in hours. Warlords who had ruled unchallenged for decades were dragged from their thrones and executed. But the Emperor did not rely solely on military might. He understood that conquest required more than just defeating armies. It required winning hearts and minds, or at least convincing people that resistance was futile. To this end,
he employed sophisticated propaganda, presenting himself as humanity's savior, the one who would end the Age of Strife and usher in a new golden age. He promised peace, prosperity, and a return to the stars. For a population that had known nothing but war and suffering for thousands of years, these promises were intoxicating. The Emperor also demonstrated a willingness to negotiate when it served his purposes. Not every techno-barbarian state was conquered by force. Some, recognizing the futility of resistance or seduced by the Emperor's vision, submitted peacefully. The Achaemenid Empire, a wealthy confederation of tribes in what had once been the Middle East, allied with the Emperor early in the Unification Wars. In exchange for their submission, they were spared the horrors of invasion, and their people were given preferential treatment in the recruitment for the nascent Space Marine legions. Other states required more persuasion. The Kingdom of Albia, located in what had once been the British Isles, proved to be one of the most formidable obstacles the Emperor faced. The Albians were a warrior culture, their society organized around ancient clan structures that valued martial prowess above all else. They fielded armies of Ironside warriors, proto-dreadnoughts that housed the minds of their greatest fighters, and they fought with a ferocity that impressed even the Thunder Warriors. Battle after battle, the Albians held back the Emperor's forces, inflicting casualties that would have broken lesser armies. The Emperor, recognizing the quality of his opponents, made a decision that would set a precedent for the rest of the Unification Wars. He called for a ceasefire and appeared before the Albian clan lords unarmed, clothed in white and crimson. There, he spoke of his vision for humanity, of the Great Crusade that would reunite mankind's scattered colonies, of the glory that awaited those who joined him willingly rather than being conquered. The Albian lords, impressed by the Emperor's courage and swayed by his words, agreed to submit. They became some of the most zealous supporters of the Imperium, and their warriors would form the core of several Space Marine legions, most notably the Dusk Raiders, who would later become the Death Guard. This diplomatic victory demonstrated that the Emperor was not merely a conqueror, but a leader capable of inspiring genuine loyalty. But for every state that submitted peacefully, there were dozens that had to be crushed by force. The Pan-Pacific Empire, a vast techno-barbarian state that controlled much of East Asia, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, resisted fiercely under the rule of the warlord Narthan Dumi. The wars against the Pan-Pacific Empire were some of the bloodiest of the entire Unification period, with battles that lasted for weeks and left millions dead. The Emperor's forces eventually prevailed, but the cost was staggering. The Indonesic bloc, another powerful state in Southeast Asia, fell after a campaign that saw the use of some of the most advanced weapons in the Emperor's arsenal. The bloc's leader, Cardinal Tang, was a religious fanatic who commanded armies of zealots willing to die for their faith. The Emperor's forces had to fight for every meter of ground, facing enemies who would rather die than surrender. When Cardinal Tang was finally captured, the Emperor made an example of him, demonstrating that resistance would not be tolerated. As the Unification Wars progressed, the Emperor's tactics evolved. He learned to exploit the divisions between the techno-barbarian states, playing them against one another, weakening them before moving in for the kill. He used terror as a weapon, ensuring that news of the Thunder Warriors' brutality spread far and wide. He offered generous terms to those who submitted early, and showed no mercy to those who resisted to the end. It was a calculated campaign of conquest that combined military might with psychological warfare and political maneuvering. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the Emperor's strategy was his long-term vision. He was not merely conquering Terra for the sake of conquest. Every battle, every campaign, was part of a larger plan. He was building the foundation for an interstellar empire, creating the infrastructure and institutions that would allow humanity to reclaim the galaxy. Even as his armies fought across Terra's surface, he was establishing the bureaucratic apparatus that would become the Adeptus Terra. He was forging alliances with the Mechanicum of Mars, securing access to the advanced technologies and manufacturing capabilities he would need for the Great Crusade. He was preparing for a future that extended far beyond Terra's poisoned skies. The techno-barbarian kingdoms, Terra's warring states. To truly understand the scale of the Emperor's achievement, we must examine the enemies he faced. The techno-barbarian states of Terra were not primitive tribes armed with clubs and spears. They were sophisticated military powers, each controlling vast territories and commanding armies equipped with weapons that could devastate entire regions. Some possessed technologies that rivaled or even exceeded what the Emperor could field. They were formidable opponents, and defeating them required every ounce of the Emperor's strategic genius. The most powerful of these states was Ursh, a vast empire that controlled much of Central Asia and Russia. Ursh was ruled by the despot Caligan, a warlord of legendary cruelty who commanded armies numbering in the millions. Caligan wore distinctive artificer armor known as the Armor of Pearl, a relic from the age of technology that made him nearly invulnerable in combat. His empire was organized along military lines, with every aspect of society geared toward war. Ursh fielded some of the most terrifying warriors of the Unification Wars. The Tupolev Lancers were tribal warriors from the edge of the Caucasus wastes, known for their berserk charges and savage nature. They would hurl themselves at enemy lines with chain axes swinging, caring nothing for their own lives, seeking only to kill as many enemies as possible before they fell. The psychological impact of facing these warriors was immense, and many armies broke and ran rather than face them in combat. But Ursh's true strength lay in its use of sorcery and warpcraft. Caligan had made pacts with entities from beyond the Veil, gaining access to powers that should not exist in the material universe. His armies included Wrath Singers, Psychers who could kill with a word, and Oneirocritics, seers who could predict the future and guide Ursh's forces to victory. The Emperor's forces faced not just conventional armies but demonic entities and warp-spawned horrors that defied the laws of physics. The war against Ursh was one of the longest and bloodiest campaigns of the Unification Wars. Caligan proved to be a cunning opponent, using the vast distances of his empire to his advantage, forcing the emperor's armies to fight across thousands of kilometers of hostile territory. The battles were apocalyptic in scale, with body counts in the millions. Entire regions were reduced to ash and rubble. The emperor himself took to the field multiple times, his psychic might the only force capable of countering Caligan's sorcery. The final battle against Ursh saw the emperor face Caligan in single combat. The details of this duel have been lost to history, obscured by propaganda and myth. But the outcome was never in doubt. Caligan fell, his armor of pearl claimed as a trophy that would later be displayed in the Imperial Palace. With their leader dead and their armies shattered, Ursh collapsed, its territories absorbed into the growing Imperium. Another formidable opponent was the Ethnarchy of the Caucasus Wastes, a technocratic dictatorship
ruled by scientist nobles who specialized in biotechnology. The Ethnarchs controlled a network of underground vaults and laboratories where they conducted experiments that would have been considered abominations even by the standards of the Age of Strife. They created gene-augmented warriors called the Urkasis, soldiers who were roughly equivalent to thunder warriors in combat capability. They enslaved psychers and used them as living weapons. They bred mutant creatures specifically designed to kill. The Ethnarchy's strongholds were buried deep beneath the mountains of the Caucasus, protected by power fields that made them nearly impregnable. An earlier attempt by the Emperor's forces to storm these fortresses had resulted in the deaths of nearly 10,000 Thunder Warriors and over 1 million other soldiers. The Emperor learned from this failure, and when he returned to the Caucasus, he brought with him a force unlike any that had been assembled before. 6 proto-legions of the newly created Space Marines were committed to the assault, along with the Legio Custodes and countless other forces. But the key to victory lay with the nascent 18th Legion, who would later become the Salamanders. These warriors were equipped with specially modified armor and armed with newly developed weapons from Mars. They were loaded into massive termite boring machines and sent deep into the earth, tasked with destroying the geothermal furnaces that powered the Ethnarchy's defenses. The mission was considered suicidal. The Tempest Galleries, where the furnaces were located, were a 100-kilometer-long string of caverns filled with storms of flame and electromagnetic force. The conditions were so extreme that even Space Marine armor could barely withstand them. Communication was impossible once the termites descended into the earth. For weeks, nothing was heard from the assault force, and many believed they had been lost. But the Emperor had faith in his warriors, and that faith was rewarded. When the power fields protecting the Ethnarchy's strongholds suddenly failed, the full might of the Imperial forces fell upon them. The Ethnarchs were dragged from their laboratories and executed. Their secrets were claimed by the Emperor. And when a long-dormant volcano near the edge of the wastes erupted weeks later, it disgorged a single termite carrying just over 1,000 survivors from the 18th Legion. They had succeeded in their mission, though at a terrible cost. The Molland Sen Confederacy presented a different kind of challenge. This state, located in what had once been Southeast Asia, was ruled by a priest king who commanded armies of religious zealots. The Molland Sen practiced a form of sorcery that involved blood sacrifice and demon summoning. Their warriors were not merely fighting for territory or resources, but for their faith, and they would rather die than surrender.
The campaign against Mal and Sen was notable for the first recorded
instance of Thunder Warriors being exposed to concentrated warp energy. During one battle, the Confederacy's sorcerers unleashed a ritual that tore open a rift to the Imperium. The Thunder Warriors who were caught in the resulting warp storm were driven into a berserk frenzy, their already aggressive nature amplified to the point of madness. They slaughtered everything in their path, friend and foe alike, unable to distinguish between ally and enemy. This incident was deeply troubling to the Emperor. It demonstrated that the Thunder Warriors, for all their effectiveness, had a fundamental flaw. They were too unstable, too prone to losing control. This realization would play a significant role in the Emperor's decision to eventually replace them with the more stable Space Marines. But that decision still lay in the future. For now, the Thunder Warriors remained the Emperor's primary weapon, and they continued to fight with unmatched ferocity. The Kingdom of Aurora, located in Antarctica, was one of the last major states to fall. Aurora was ruled by a priest king named Cadmus, who commanded advanced technologies that had been preserved from the Age of Technology. The Auriocans fielded weapons that could manipulate gravity and time, making them incredibly dangerous opponents. The war against Aurora was brief but intense, ending with the complete destruction of the kingdom and the death of Cadmus. Smaller states fell one by one, each conquest adding to the Emperor's growing domain. The Kingdom of Frank in Western Europe was crushed after its leader, Havulek Dagros, led a rebellion against imperial rule. The rebellion was put down with brutal efficiency by an early generation of Space Marines from the Dusk Raiders Legion. The Nordafric conclaves in North Africa submitted after seeing the fate of those who resisted. The America territories in North America were absorbed through a combination of military conquest and diplomatic maneuvering. Each victory brought the Emperor closer to his goal of a unified Terra. But each victory also came at a cost. The Thunder Warriors, for all their might, were dying. Some fell in battle, their bodies torn apart by enemy fire or crushed beneath collapsing buildings. Others simply dropped dead, their enhanced physiology unable to sustain itself. The genetic modifications that made them superhuman also made them unstable, and their bodies were beginning to reject the augmentations. The Emperor knew that the Thunder Warriors would not last long enough to see the Great Crusade. They were a temporary solution, a blunt instrument designed for a specific purpose. Once that purpose was fulfilled, they would have to be replaced. The Thunder Warriors, heroes and victims. The Thunder Warriors deserve special attention, for they were both the architects of the Emperor's victory and the victims of his ambition. These warriors were the first of the Emperor's genetically enhanced super soldiers, the prototypes from which all later Space Marines would be derived. They were created to be living weapons, and they fulfilled that purpose with terrifying efficiency. But they were also deeply flawed, and those flaws would ultimately lead to their destruction. The process of creating a Thunder Warrior was brutal and often fatal.
Unlike the later Space Marines, who were created from adolescent boys through a carefully controlled process of organ implantation and genetic modification, Thunder Warriors were created from adult men through a much cruder method. The candidate would be subjected to alchemical augmentation, his body flooded with gene-sculpting compounds that rewrote his DNA at the cellular level. Muscle tissue would be grafted onto his skeleton, increasing his size and strength. His bones would be reinforced with metallic compounds. His organs would be enhanced or replaced entirely. The survival rate for this process was low, perhaps as low as 1 in 10. Those who survived emerged as something more than human, but less than stable. A Thunder Warrior stood over 2.5 meters tall, his body a mass of enhanced muscle that gave him strength far beyond that of any normal human. He could lift weights that would crush an ordinary man. He could run at speeds that would tear apart unaugmented legs. He could fight for days without rest, his enhanced metabolism burning through energy at an incredible rate. But this power came at a cost. The genetic modifications that created Thunder Warriors were unstable, prone to rejection and degradation. A Thunder Warrior's body was constantly at war with itself, his enhanced tissues fighting against his original biology. This internal conflict manifested in various ways. Some Thunder Warriors developed cancerous growths that had to be surgically removed. Others experienced organ failure, their enhanced organs simply giving out without warning. Still others suffered from mental instability, their minds unable to cope with the changes that had been wrought upon their bodies. The average lifespan of a Thunder Warrior was measured in decades, not centuries. Most would be dead within 30 or 40 years of their creation, their bodies simply unable to sustain themselves any longer. This was a known limitation, accepted by both the Emperor and the Thunder Warriors themselves. They were not created to be immortal. They were created to conquer Terra. And once that conquest was complete, they would no longer be needed. But despite their flaws, the Thunder Warriors were magnificent warriors. They fought with a ferocity and skill that made them legends across Terra. They were not emotionless killing machines like the later Space Marines would be. They laughed and joked with one another. They felt fear and anger and joy. They formed bonds of brotherhood with their fellow warriors. They were, in many ways, more human than the Space Marines who would replace them. And that humanity made them all the more tragic. The Thunder Warriors were organized
into 20 legions, each with its own character and specialization. The 4th Legion, the Iron Lords, specialized in siege warfare and were known for their methodical approach to combat. They would study a fortress for days, identifying weak points and planning their assault with meticulous care. When they finally attacked, they did so with overwhelming force, bringing down walls and gates with heavy weapons before storming through the breach. Other legions had different specializations. Some focused on rapid assault, using speed and surprise to overwhelm their enemies. Others excelled at defensive operations, holding positions against impossible odds. Still others specialized in terror tactics, using their fearsome appearance and brutal methods to break enemy morale before the battle even began. Each legion was commanded by a Primarch, though these were not the godlike beings that would later lead the Space Marine legions. The Thunder Warrior Primarchs were simply the best of their kind, warriors who had proven themselves in battle
and demonstrated the mental stability necessary for command. They were not genetically distinct from the warriors they led, merely superior examples of the same template. One of the most famous Thunder Warrior Primarchs was Ushoten, commander of the 4th Legion. Ushoten was a warrior of exceptional skill and intelligence, known for his tactical acumen and his ability to inspire his men. He led the Iron Lords through some of the bloodiest campaigns of the Unification Wars, always at the forefront of the fighting, always leading by example. His warriors would have followed him into hell itself, and on more than one occasion, they did exactly that. Another notable Thunder Warrior was Eric Tyrannus, known as the Lightning Bearer. Tyrannus was one of the first Thunder Warriors ever created, and he became a symbol of everything the Legiones Catigis represented. He was a warrior of unmatched prowess, capable of feats that seemed impossible even by the standards of his enhanced brethren. He fought in countless battles, always surviving, always victorious. His name became synonymous with the Thunder Warriors themselves, and when the Unification Wars finally ended, it was Tyrannus who was said to have raised the banner of lightning at the final declaration of unity. But the truth about Tyrannus and the other Thunder Warriors was far darker than the official histories would admit. The Thunder Warriors were not heroes who died gloriously in the final battle of the Unification Wars. They were victims of a calculated betrayal, murdered by the very emperor they had served so faithfully. The Great Betrayal, Mount Ararat, and the Culling. The official imperial histories record that the last battle of the Unification Wars took place at Mount Ararat in the kingdom of Urartu in the year 669 M30. According to these histories, the Thunder Warriors fought valiantly against the last holdouts of techno-barbarian resistance, achieving a glorious victory that finally brought all of Terra under the Emperor's rule. The histories claim that the Thunder Warriors died to a man in this final battle, their sacrifice ensuring the success of the Unification and paving the way for the Great Crusade. This version of events is a lie, a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide one of the Emperor's darkest deeds. The truth is that the Thunder Warriors were not killed by the Emperor's enemies. They were killed by the Emperor himself, or more precisely, by his servants acting on his orders. By the time of Mount Ararat, the Emperor had already created the first Space Marines, the Legiones Astartes, who would become the primary military force of the Great Crusade. These new warriors were superior to the Thunder Warriors in almost every way. They were more stable, with genetic modifications that would allow them to live for centuries rather than decades. They were more disciplined, their emotions carefully controlled through hypno-indoctrination and psychological conditioning. They were more versatile, capable of adapting to any combat situation, rather than being specialized for the brutal close-quarters fighting that the Thunder Warriors excelled at. Most importantly, the Space Marines were controllable. The Thunder Warriors, for all their effectiveness, were dangerous even to their allies. They were prone to fits of rage and violence. They were difficult to command, often ignoring orders in the heat of battle. They were warriors, not soldiers, and the Emperor needed soldiers for the Great Crusade. He needed warriors who would follow orders without question, who would fight for decades or even centuries without complaint, who would be loyal to the Imperium rather than to individual commanders. The Thunder Warriors had served their purpose. They had conquered Terra, breaking the power of the techno-barbarian warlords and unifying humanity's homeworld under the Emperor's rule. But they were no longer needed, and their continued existence posed a threat to the stability of the nascent Imperium. They were too violent, too unstable, too independent. They would not fit into the carefully ordered society that the Emperor was building. They had to be eliminated. The Emperor could not simply disband the Thunder Warriors and send them into retirement. They were warriors to their core, and they would not accept being cast aside. Moreover, they knew too much about the Emperor's methods, about the genetic engineering techniques that had created them, about the darker aspects of the Unification Wars that the official histories would later gloss over. They were a security risk that could not be tolerated. So the Emperor made a decision that would haunt the Imperium for millennia to come. He ordered the Thunder Warriors to be culled, systematically hunted down and killed. The method of this culling varied. Some Thunder Warriors were sent on suicide missions, thrown against impossible odds with no support or reinforcements. Others were simply murdered in their barracks, killed by the Legio Custodes, the Emperor's personal bodyguards who were the only warriors capable of reliably defeating Thunder Warriors in combat. The Battle of Mount Ararat was real, but it was not the glorious last stand that the histories describe. It was a massacre, a carefully orchestrated slaughter designed to eliminate the Thunder Warriors while providing a cover story that would satisfy the population of Terra. The Thunder Warriors fought bravely, as they always did, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. They were betrayed by the very Emperor they had served, and they died not as heroes, but as victims. Not all the Thunder Warriors died at Mount Ararat. Some survived, escaping into the wastelands of Terra or fleeing off-world. These survivors lived in hiding, knowing that the Emperor's agents were hunting them. Some formed small bands, trying to eke out an existence on the fringes of imperial society. Others descended into the underworld of Terra's hive cities, becoming criminals or gladiators. A few even managed to steal Space Marine gene seed, using it to extend their failing lifespans and continue their existence for a few more years. Eric Tyrannus was one of these survivors. The Lightning Bearer, the symbol of the Thunder Warriors' glory, lived on in the shadows of Terra, a bitter reminder of the Emperor's betrayal. Tyrannus and his fellow survivors knew the truth about Mount Ararat, and they harbored a deep resentment toward the Emperor who had cast them aside. But they were powerless to act, hunted and alone, their numbers dwindling with each passing year as their bodies finally gave out. Years later, during the early days of the Great Crusade, a group of Thunder Warrior survivors calling themselves the Dight Tar participated in the Cerberus insurrection, a rebellion on an asteroid prison colony. The Emperor sent the Warhounds Legion, who would later become the World Eaters, to crush the rebellion. The Warhounds, eager for a challenge, engaged the Thunder Warriors in close combat rather than simply bombarding them from orbit. The battle that followed was a testament to the Thunder Warriors' prowess. Despite being heavily outnumbered and suffering from years of genetic degradation, the Dight Tar managed to kill 3 to 4 Space Marines for every Thunder Warrior that fell. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and rage, knowing that this would be their last battle. For 5 hours, the combat raged, the corridors of the prison colony running red with blood. In the end, the Thunder Warriors were all killed, but they had proven that even in their diminished state, they were still among the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. The fate of the Thunder Warriors is one of the great tragedies of the Warhammer 40,000 setting. They were heroes who conquered a world, only to be discarded like broken tools when they were no longer useful. They were warriors who gave everything for the Emperor's vision, only to be betrayed by the very being they had served. Their story is a reminder that in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no such thing as a happy ending, and even the greatest heroes can become victims of the very cause they fought for. Reconstruction and the Treaty of Mars. By 712 M30, the Unification Wars were officially declared over. Terra, for the first time in millennia, was united under a single ruler. The techno-barbarian warlords were dead or imprisoned. The Thunder Warriors had been eliminated. The Emperor stood as the undisputed master of humanity's homeworld, and his attention could now turn to the stars. But the Terra that emerged from the Unification Wars was a broken world. The campaigns had been devastating, with casualties numbering in the hundreds of millions, perhaps even billions. Entire regions had been reduced to radioactive wastelands. Hive cities that had stood for thousands of years lay in ruins. The infrastructure that had barely sustained Terra's population during the Age of Strife was now completely shattered. The Emperor understood that before he could launch the Great Crusade, he would have to rebuild Terra. The planet would need to serve as the capital of his new Imperium, the heart from which his rule would extend across the galaxy. It would need to be a symbol of humanity's resurgence, a beacon of hope that would inspire the scattered colonies of mankind to rejoin the fold. The reconstruction of Terra was a monumental undertaking that would take decades to complete. The Emperor mobilized every resource at his disposal, conscripting millions of workers to clear rubble, rebuild infrastructure, and construct new facilities. The great hive cities were rebuilt, their spires reaching even higher than before. The imperial palace was constructed in the Himalayan mountains, a massive complex that would eventually cover an entire mountain range and house billions of people.
But the Emperor knew that Terra's resources alone would not be enough. He needed access to advanced technologies and manufacturing capabilities that had been lost during the Age of Strife. He needed weapons and ships and equipment for the armies that would fight in the Great Crusade. And there was only one place in the Sol system where such things could be found: Mars. Mars, the red planet, had followed a different path during the Age of Strife. While Terra descended into barbarism, Mars had maintained much of its technological knowledge, preserved by the cult Mechanicus, a techno-religious organization that worshipped the machine god. The Mechanicum, as they were known, controlled vast forge complexes capable of producing everything from simple tools to massive warships. They possessed knowledge of technologies that had been lost everywhere else in the galaxy. They were, in short, exactly what the Emperor needed. But the Mechanicum was not interested in simply submitting to the Emperor's rule. They had their own traditions, their own beliefs, their own hierarchy. They viewed themselves as the guardians of humanity's technological heritage, and they were not about to hand that heritage over to some warlord from Terra, no matter how powerful he might be. The Emperor, demonstrating the diplomatic skills that had served him so well during the Unification Wars, approached the Mechanicum not as a conqueror, but as a partner. He offered them a deal. In exchange for their support and their manufacturing capabilities, the Mechanicum would be allowed to maintain their autonomy and their religious freedom. They would become part of the Imperium, but they would not be subject to the same rules and regulations as other imperial institutions. They would be allowed to continue worshipping the machine god, to maintain their own hierarchy, to govern themselves as they saw fit. This offer was formalized in the Treaty of Mars, one of the most important documents in imperial history. The treaty established the Mechanicum as a semi-autonomous organization within the Imperium, with rights and privileges that no other institution would enjoy. In exchange, the Mechanicum agreed to provide the Emperor with the weapons, ships, and equipment he would need for the Great Crusade. They would become the Imperium's primary source of technology, responsible for maintaining and producing everything from lasguns to titans. The Treaty of Mars was a masterstroke of diplomacy, securing for the Emperor access to resources that would prove crucial to the success of the Great Crusade. But it also established a precedent that would have far-reaching consequences. By allowing the Mechanicum to maintain their independence, the Emperor created a power center within the Imperium that was not entirely under his control. This would lead to tensions and conflicts in the millennia to come, as the Mechanicum pursued their own agenda, sometimes in alignment with the Imperium's goals, and sometimes in opposition to them. With the Treaty of Mars secured and Terra's reconstruction well underway, the Emperor could finally turn his attention to the next phase of his plan. The Unification Wars had been merely the first step, the foundation upon which everything else would be built. Now it was time to reach for the stars, to launch the Great Crusade that would reunite humanity's scattered colonies and forge an empire that would span the galaxy. But before the Great Crusade could begin,
the Emperor had one more task to complete. He needed to create the warriors who would fight in it. The Thunder Warriors were gone, eliminated because they were too flogged to serve in a long-term campaign. The first Space Marines had been created, but they were few in number, perhaps only a few thousand at most. The Emperor needed armies, legions of superhuman warriors who could conquer worlds and hold them against any threat. To create these warriors, the Emperor turned to his greatest work, the project that he had been laboring on in secret for decades. Deep beneath the Himalayan mountains, in laboratories that few would ever see, the Emperor had been working on creating 20 beings of unparalleled power and perfection. These beings would serve as the templates for the Space Marine legions, the genetic blueprints from which all future Astartes would be derived. They would be generals and leaders, warriors and statesmen, the greatest of humanity's champions. They were the Primarchs, and their creation would change the course of human history forever. But that is a story for another time. For now, the Unification Wars were over. Terra was united. The Imperium had been born, and the Emperor stood ready to lead humanity into a new age, an age of conquest and glory that would see mankind reclaim its place among the stars. The Unification Wars had cost millions of lives. They had devastated Terra, turning large portions of the planet into wastelands that would take centuries to recover. They had required the creation and subsequent destruction of the Thunder Warriors, a betrayal that would haunt the Imperium for millennia. They had established precedents and patterns that would shape the Imperium's development, from the Treaty of Mars to the methods of conquest that would be employed during the Great Crusade. But they had also achieved their goal. Terra was united. Humanity had a leader, a being of immense power and vision who was willing to do whatever was necessary to ensure mankind's survival. The Age of Strife was over. The Age of the Imperium had begun. And though the future would bring horrors beyond imagining, though the Emperor's dream would ultimately fail and the Imperium would become a nightmare of oppression and stagnation, for a brief moment at the dawn of the 31st millennium, there was hope. Hope that humanity could be saved. Hope that the darkness could be pushed back. Hope that mankind's best days lay ahead rather than behind. That hope would prove to be false. But in the aftermath of the Unification Wars, it burned bright enough to light the way to the stars. Legacy of Thunder. The Unification Wars' lasting impact. The Unification Wars ended over 10,000 years ago, but their impact continues to shape the Imperium in the 41st millennium. The methods and precedents established during those brutal campaigns became the template for how the Imperium would operate for millennia to come. The victories and betrayals of that era cast long shadows that still darken the halls of the Imperial Palace. Perhaps the most significant legacy of the Unification Wars is the very concept of the Imperium itself. Before the Emperor emerged from his hidden fortress, Terra was divided into hundreds of competing states, each with its own culture, government, and vision for the future. The Emperor's conquest imposed a single, unified vision on all of humanity, a vision that prioritized survival and expansion above all else. This vision
become the foundation of the Imperial Creed, the belief system that would eventually replace the Emperor's secular imperial truth and become the dominant religion of the Imperium. The Unification Wars also established the Emperor's willingness to do whatever was necessary to achieve his goals, regardless of the moral cost. The betrayal of the Thunder Warriors was only the first of many dark deeds that the Emperor would commit in the name of humanity's survival. The methods he employed during the Unification Wars, the combination of overwhelming military force, sophisticated propaganda, and ruthless elimination of opposition, would become standard imperial practice. The Imperium that emerged from the Unification Wars was built on a foundation of pragmatism and brutality, and that foundation has never changed. The Treaty of Mars established another precedent that would have far-reaching consequences. By allowing the Mechanicum to maintain their autonomy, the Emperor created a model for how the Imperium would deal with powerful institutions that could not be easily conquered or controlled. This model of negotiated autonomy would be repeated throughout the Great Crusade and beyond, as the Imperium incorporated various organizations and institutions into its structure, while allowing them to maintain some degree of independence. The Adeptus Astartes, the Inquisition, the Ecclesiarchy, all of these organizations would enjoy varying degrees of autonomy within the imperial system, creating a complex web of competing power centers that would both strengthen and weaken the Imperium. The Unification Wars also demonstrated the importance of genetic engineering and enhancement in the Emperor's vision for humanity. The Thunder Warriors were merely the first step in a process that would eventually produce the Space Marines, the Primarchs, and countless other enhanced warriors. The Emperor's willingness to fundamentally alter human biology in pursuit of military superiority would become a defining characteristic of the Imperium, leading to the creation of everything from the Adeptus Custodes to the various abhuman strains that serve the Imperium in different capacities. But perhaps the most tragic legacy of the Unification Wars is what they reveal about the Emperor himself. The being who would become worshipped as a god by trillions of humans was willing to create warriors specifically designed to be disposable, to use them to conquer a world and then to discard them when they were no longer useful. This cold pragmatism, this willingness to sacrifice individuals for the greater good, would characterize the Emperor's rule throughout the Great Crusade and beyond. It would lead to decisions that would ultimately doom the Imperium, from the Emperor's treatment of his Primarchs to his handling of the Council of Nicaea. The Unification Wars also left physical scars on Terra that would never fully heal. Despite the massive reconstruction efforts, large portions of the planet remained poisoned and uninhabitable. The oceans boiled away or turned to toxic sludge during the Age of Strife were never fully restored. The atmosphere, choked with pollutants and radiation, would require constant maintenance to remain breathable. Terra in the 41st millennium is a world that bears the wounds of its past. A planet that has been so thoroughly devastated that it can never truly recover. The memory of the Unification Wars has also been carefully managed and manipulated by Imperial authorities. The official histories present a sanitized version of events, emphasizing the Emperor's heroism and the glory of the conquest while glossing over the darker aspects of the campaign. The betrayal of the Thunder Warriors has been hidden behind the myth of Mount Ararat. The atrocities committed during the conquest of various techno-barbarian states have been justified as necessary evils. The true cost of the unification, in lives and suffering, has been minimized or ignored entirely. This manipulation of history serves a purpose. The Imperium needs its founding myth, needs to believe that it was born from noble intentions and heroic sacrifice, rather than from pragmatism and brutality. The Emperor must be seen as a savior, not as a conqueror. The Unification Wars must be remembered as a glorious campaign of liberation, not as a brutal war of conquest. Any evidence that contradicts this narrative is suppressed or destroyed, ensuring that the official version of events remains unchallenged. But the truth has a way of surviving, hidden in fragmentary records and whispered legends. The survivors of the Thunder Warriors, those few who managed to escape the culling, carried the truth with them. Some of this knowledge was passed down through the generations, preserved by those who had reason to distrust the official imperial narrative. In the 41st millennium, there are still those who know the truth about the Unification Wars, who understand that the Imperium was built on a foundation of lies and betrayal. This knowledge is dangerous. It undermines the legitimacy of the Imperium, calls into question the divinity of the Emperor, suggests that the entire imperial system is built on a false premise. Those who possess this knowledge are hunted by the Inquisition, their records destroyed, their memories erased, or their lives ended. The Imperium cannot afford to have its founding myth challenged, cannot allow the truth about the Unification Wars to become widely known. Yet the truth persists, a ghost haunting the halls of the Imperial Palace, a reminder that even the greatest empire is built on the bones of those who were sacrificed to create it. The Thunder Warriors, those first heroes of the Imperium, were betrayed and murdered by the very emperor they served. The techno-barbarian states, for all their flaws, were destroyed not because they were evil, but because they stood in the way of the emperor's vision. The Unification Wars were not a glorious campaign of liberation, but a brutal war of conquest. And the Imperium that emerged from them was born in blood and treachery. This is the true legacy of the Unification Wars, not the sanitized myth presented in official histories, but the dark reality of what it took to unite Terra. The Emperor was willing to do anything, sacrifice anyone, betray any trust, in order to achieve his goals.
and that willingness, that cold pragmatism, would define the Imperium for the next 10,000 years. It would lead to the Horus Heresy, to the Emperor's entombment on the Golden Throne, to the slow decay of the Imperium, into the nightmare it has become in the 41st millennium. The Unification Wars were the beginning of the Imperium, but they also contained the seeds of its eventual downfall. The methods employed, the precedents established, the betrayals committed, all of these would come back to haunt the Imperium in the millennia to come. The Emperor's willingness to sacrifice the Thunder Warriors would be mirrored in his treatment of the Primarchs, leading to the rebellion of Horus and half the Space Marine legions. The brutal conquest of Terra would be repeated on a galactic scale during the Great Crusade, creating resentments and hatreds that would fester for thousands of years. The manipulation of history and suppression of truth would become standard imperial practice, leading to a society built on lies and ignorance. In the end, the Unification Wars were both the Imperium's greatest triumph and its original sin. They united humanity's homeworld and laid the foundation for a galactic empire, but they also established patterns of behavior and methods of governance that would ultimately doom that empire to stagnation and decay. The Emperor conquered Terra, but in doing so, he created an Imperium that could never live up to his vision, an empire that would survive for 10,000 years, but would never truly thrive. As we reach the end of our journey through the Unification Wars, it's worth reflecting on what these conflicts mean in the broader context of the Warhammer 40,000 setting. The Unification Wars were the beginning of everything. The moment when the Emperor stepped out of the shadows and began to actively shape humanity's destiny. They were the foundation upon which the Imperium was built, the first chapter in a story that would span 10,000 years and encompass 1,000,000 worlds. But they were also a tragedy, a tale of heroes betrayed and dreams corrupted. The Thunder Warriors, those first champions of humanity, were created to be disposable, used to conquer a world and then discarded when they were no longer needed. The techno-barbarian states, for all their flaws, represented the last remnants of human diversity and independence, and they were crushed beneath the Emperor's vision of unity. Terra itself was devastated, its surface scarred by weapons that should never have been used, its population reduced by billions. The Emperor achieved his goal. Terra was united. The Imperium was born. But the cost was staggering, and the methods employed would cast a long shadow over everything that followed. The Unification Wars demonstrated that the Emperor was willing to do anything, sacrifice anyone, betray any trust, in order to achieve his vision for humanity. This cold pragmatism would define the Imperium for millennia to come, leading to decisions and actions that would ultimately doom the Emperor's dream. In the 41st millennium, the Unification Wars are remembered as a glorious campaign, a time when the Emperor emerged to save humanity from the darkness of the Age of Strife. The official histories speak of heroic battles and noble sacrifices, of the Thunder Warriors dying gloriously at Mount Ararat, of the Emperor uniting Terra through strength and wisdom. These histories are lies, carefully constructed myths designed to legitimize the Imperium and sanctify the Emperor. The truth is darker and more complex. The Unification Wars were a brutal campaign of conquest, fought with weapons of mass destruction and tactics that would be considered war crimes by any reasonable standard. The Thunder Warriors were betrayed and murdered by the Emperor they served. The techno-barbarian states were destroyed, not because they were evil, but because they stood in the way of the Emperor's vision. Terra was united not through wisdom and diplomacy, but through overwhelming force and the threat of annihilation. Yet for all their darkness, the Unification Wars were also necessary. Terra in the late 29th millennium was a dying world, its population locked in an endless cycle of war and suffering. The techno-barbarian warlords were leading humanity toward extinction, their petty conflicts consuming resources and lives that could never be replaced. Without the Emperor's intervention, Terra would have eventually collapsed completely, its population reduced to scattered tribes living in the ruins of a once great civilization. The Emperor saw this future and acted to prevent it. His methods were brutal, his tactics ruthless, his willingness to sacrifice individuals for the greater good absolute. But he succeeded where countless others had failed. He united Terra. He ended the Age of Strife. He gave humanity a chance to survive and reclaim its place among the stars. Whether that chance was worth the cost, whether the Imperium that emerged from the Unification Wars was better than what came before, these are questions that each person must answer for themselves. What is certain is that the Unification Wars changed everything. They marked the end of one age and the beginning of another. They transformed the Emperor from a hidden manipulator into an open ruler. They created the template for the Imperium that would dominate the galaxy for 10,000 years. They demonstrated both the best and worst of what humanity is capable of, the heights of heroism and the depths of betrayal. Thunder of those ancient wars has long since faded, but its echoes still resonate through the Imperium. Every Space Marine carries the genetic legacy of the Thunder Warriors, refined and perfected, but still recognizable. Every Imperial institution operates according to precedents established during the Unification. Every world conquered by the Imperium is conquered using methods first employed on Terra. The Unification Wars are over, but their legacy lives on, shaping the Imperium in ways both obvious and subtle. As we close this chapter of Imperial history, remember that the Imperium was not born from noble intentions and heroic sacrifice. It was born from pragmatism and brutality, from a willingness to do whatever was necessary to ensure humanity's survival. The Emperor was not a savior, but a conqueror, and the Imperium he created reflects that truth. It is an empire built on lies and maintained through oppression. an empire that has survived for 10,000 years, but has never truly thrived. Yet it endures, despite everything, despite the betrayals and the brutality and the endless wars. The Imperium survives. Terra still stands as humanity's throne world. The Emperor still watches over his people from the Golden Throne. And somewhere in the darkness, the memory of the Thunder Warriors persists, a reminder of the price that was paid to create the Imperium, and a warning of what happens to those who serve the Emperor too well. The Unification Wars were the beginning of the Imperium, but they also contained the seeds of its eventual end. The methods employed, the precedents established, the betrayals committed, all of these would come back to haunt the Imperium in the millennia to come. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And that war began on Terra, in the fires of the Unification, when the Emperor first raised his banner and declared that humanity would be united, no matter the cost. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Unification Wars, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Warhammer lore explorations. The Emperor protects, but he also betrays. And understanding that duality is key to understanding the Imperium itself. Until next time, sleep well, and remember that even in the darkest night, there are stories worth telling, truths worth preserving, and heroes worth remembering, even if they were betrayed by the very cause they fought for. Now sleep, fall deep, deep asleep.